know what it's like when you look up at the starry sky and feel that those points of light, so bright and numerous, seem more present than the people around you. That feeling of being in a place full of people, maybe even surrounded by friends or family, but still feeling completely alone. It's as if there's a glass wall between you and the rest of the world. You see everything, hear everything, but no one seems to really reach you. Maybe you've sent messages that went unanswered for days, or said something important in a conversation and no one seemed to notice. That tightness in your chest when you try so hard to be heard, to be seen, and yet your voice seems to get lost like a whisper in the wind. Isn't it strange how we can have hundreds of online connections and still feel that no one really knows us? The nights are always harder, aren't they? When the noise of the day subsides and you find yourself alone with your thoughts. You pick up your cell phone, see photos of people smiling in groups, celebrating moments, and wonder why it seems so easy for others. Why they seem to naturally belong somewhere, while you feel like a visitor trying to crack a secret code that everyone already knows. I understand that moment when you look in the mirror and wonder if there's something wrong with you. If there's a reason why you feel so disconnected when the world has never been so connected. You wonder if you're asking for too much, expecting too much, or if you're just not cut out for this world and its complicated rules of belonging. Small talk has become an art you've mastered, hasn't it? You smile, make the right comments, participate in the social back and forth, but inside you feel that no one really touches your essence. As if you were playing a role in a play that everyone knows but you. And at night, when you take off the mask, you feel both relief and loneliness. There are days when loneliness seems a more faithful companion than anyone has ever been. At least it never promises to stay and then disappears. It never says it will call and doesn't. It never makes you feel strange for being who you are. Loneliness, in its constancy, sometimes seems more honest than many human relationships we experience. Have you ever felt that pang when you see a group laughing at an inside joke, or friends with years of shared stories? That feeling of eternally being the new one, the outsider, even in places where you technically belong. It's like arriving at a party for which everyone has been given secret instructions on how to dress, how to speak, how to exist, everyone except you. Perhaps the hardest thing is when you try to explain this feeling to someone and only get simple advice back. You need to get out more, try to be more sociable. As if you hadn't tried 1,000 times in 1,000 different ways. As if the solution was so obvious and you were the only one who couldn't see it, which only makes you feel even more isolated, even more different. Know that even when the stars seem too far away to reach, they are still there, shining brightly. And somehow, perhaps not by coincidence, it's precisely at the moments when we feel most invisible that we start to notice larger patterns in the night sky. As if solitude sharpens our vision to see connections that previously went unnoticed. Have you ever noticed how much easier it is to see the stars when we're away from the city lights? Sometimes we need to get away from the constant glare and incessant noise to really see the beauty of what has always been there. The absence of superficial connections opens up space to perceive deeper, truer presences, even if they are more distant. When you look back at the times when you felt most alone, can you see how these periods often preceded major changes in your life? It's almost as if solitude is a necessary waiting room, a preparation space where something new is formed before you can even name it. There is an ancient wisdom in this pattern that few notice. I see how you try, how you strive, how you maintain hope even when it would be easier to give up. And I want you to know that this sensitivity that makes you feel so out of place is also your greatest strength. Your ability to feel deeply, to notice what others ignore, to question what everyone accepts. These are precious qualities in a world that values the quantity of connections more than their quality. Have you ever observed how trees grow? Those that are isolated, with no other trees competing for light and space around them, often become the most majestic, with branches extending in all directions, deep roots, wide trunks. They don't grow this way by chance, but because they have had room to expand in a way that would be impossible in a dense forest. In the same way, there are types of personal growth that only happen when we have space around us, when we are not constantly shaped by contact with others. Think of the moon for a moment. When we look up at the sky, it sometimes seems completely alone, a silver circle floating in the void. But the truth is that the moon is never really alone. It is in constant gravitational dialogue with the Earth, with the Sun, with the entire solar system. Its apparent solitude is an illusion caused by our limited perspective. And so it can be with you too. What seems like isolation may just be a specific angle of a much larger cosmic dance. There is a story about a small stream that tried desperately to maintain its identity as it traveled towards the ocean. It struggled against every rock, resisted every bend, fearful of losing who it was. When he finally reached the vast sea, he realized that he wasn't losing his existence. He was expanding into something much bigger. Sometimes, what we interpret as loneliness is just the space between who we were and who we are becoming, a necessary interval of transformation. Have you ever baked bread? If so, you know that after mixing all the ingredients comes the most important part, letting the dough rest. During this time, apparently nothing happens. The dough just sits there covered on its own. But it is precisely during this period of stillness that fermentation takes place, that flavors develop, that real transformation takes place. Our periods of isolation work in a similar way. They appear empty on the outside, but internally, essential processes are in full swing. In nature, what looks like death is often just preparation. Trees lose their leaves in the fall not because they are dying, but because they are preparing to survive the winter and be reborn in the spring. The moments when you feel disconnected from everything and everyone can be like this fall, a necessary release of what no longer serves, a preparation for a new cycle that is not yet visible, but is already in motion. Consider how in ancient stories, heroes always had to go through a period of solitude before discovering their true purpose. Jesus went into the desert, Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree, Moses climbed the mountain alone. These were not punishments, but preparations. Isolation was not the end goal, but a necessary training ground for what was to come. Your feeling of not belonging can be exactly that kind of preparation, a call to something that others can't hear. Seeds need the darkness of the soil to germinate. If they were always exposed to light and contact with other plants, they would never develop roots strong enough to sustain their future growth. When you feel invisible in the eyes of others, perhaps you are simply going through your germination phase, a process that should not be interrupted despite your discomfort, because it is fundamental to who you are becoming. There is an ancient wisdom in various traditions that talks about how moments of greatest spiritual growth often coincide with periods of deep loneliness. It's not that solitude causes growth, but rather that it creates the necessary space for us to hear more subtle voices that are usually drowned out by the constant noise of social life. Voices that come from within, from a wisdom that has always been there, waiting to be recognized. When you prepare a cup of tea, you need to give the leaves time to release their flavors into the hot water. If you're in a hurry, stir constantly or remove the leaves too soon, the tea will be weak without depth. It's the same with our best qualities, they need time and space to fully reveal themselves. What often feels like painful isolation may just be the time needed for our true essence to fully develop. Silence has a quality of its own that is not just the absence of sound, but a presence in itself. When you spend time alone regularly, you begin to recognize that solitude is also not just the absence of company, but a distinct presence with its own gifts. Just as we learn to appreciate different flavors over time, we can learn to recognize the unique textures and invisible gifts that only the state of solitude can offer. In modern life, we are constantly taught to fear isolation, to immediately fill it with noise, activity, interaction. It's as if we've forgotten that for thousands of years, humans have intentionally sought periods of solitude in order to find clarity. Monks, mystics, artists, thinkers, they all understood that certain truths only reveal themselves when we temporarily remove ourselves from the collective, when we allow the dust of constant social interaction to settle. Look at a garden for a moment. The plants don't all grow at the same rate. Some bloom in spring, others in summer, some wait until fall. Nobody looks at a bulb that hasn't sprouted yet and thinks there's something wrong with it. We understand that its timing is different, not worse. In the same way, each person has their own rhythm of connection and social blossoming. What may seem late or out of place may simply be different timing, equally valid and necessary. Modern science is beginning to understand what the sages have always known, that we need periods of disconnection to process our experiences, integrate learning, renew our energy. In a world that values constant connection, allow yourself to see your desire to retreat not as a flaw, but as an inner wisdom that knows exactly what you need to truly thrive, in your own time, in your own way. There is a simple exercise that I have shared with many people over the years. and it always causes a small inner revolution. For 3 days, try to live as an attentive observer of your own loneliness. Instead of resisting it, welcome it as you would an old friend who has something important to tell you. Write down what you discover without judgment. Often, when we stop fighting the feeling of isolation and start listening to it, we realize that it hasn't come to punish us, but to guide us in a specific direction that we were ignoring. The most connected people I know have something in common. They practice what I call impeccable presence. This means that when they are with someone, they are completely there, not divided between the person in front of them and their cell phone, or between the current conversation and worrying about something else. The irony is that in order to develop this capacity for deep connection with others, we must first learn to be completely present when we are alone. It's like learning to swim in shallow water before facing the ocean. You've probably heard that in order to love others, we must first love ourselves. The same goes for connection. To truly connect with other people, we first need to connect deeply with ourselves. This can start with something as simple as setting aside 15 minutes a day to sit in silence and simply observe your thoughts, without trying to change them. Like wiping the dust off a mirror, this regular practice gradually reveals a clearer picture of who you really are, beyond the roles you play for others. In my experience, one of the greatest transformations occurs when we begin to see our sensitivity not as a weakness to be overcome, but as a superpower to be harnessed. The very qualities that can make us feel out of place, perceiving what others don't see, feeling what others ignore, questioning what others accept, are exactly what the world needs most right now. The question is not how to become less sensitive, but how to turn that sensitivity into something that nourishes you and others. Have you ever noticed how the deepest friendships often begin at unexpected moments, often when we are being authentically ourselves, without trying to impress anyone? There's a simple practice I call deliberate authenticity. Choose a small aspect of yourself that you usually hide and allow it to show in a conversation. It could be an unusual interest, a thought you would normally keep to yourself, a vulnerability. Like planting a seed, this small act of courage often grows into surprisingly deep connections. There's an interesting pattern I've observed over the years. The people who develop the most meaningful connections aren't necessarily the most outgoing or socially skilled, but those who have found something they love to do and dedicated themselves to it. When we engage deeply with an activity that matters to us, be it gardening, music, volunteering, programming, or anything else, we naturally attract people who resonate with that same energy. Passion is one of the greatest magnets for authentic connections. A transformative practice is what I call radiant listening, when you listen to someone not just with your ears and mind, but with your whole being, as if that person were, at that moment, the most important thing in the world. It's surprising how rare this is nowadays and how people respond when they feel they are really being listened to. Start practicing with one person a week, giving them your undivided attention for just 5 minutes, and observe how this gradually transforms the quality of your connections. There is an ancient tradition in various cultures of using the time before dawn for self-discovery practices. There is something special about this time. The world is still quiet, distractions are minimal, and our mind operates differently. Try waking up 30 minutes earlier than usual and use this time just for you, not for tasks or planning, but for simply being. Many people find that this small change creates a foundation of peace that supports more authentic connections throughout the day. When we feel that no one sees us, we are often looking for recognition in the wrong places. A powerful practice is to identify the specific type of recognition we most crave. Would it be for our creativity, our intelligence, our kindness, our strength? And then find ways to offer exactly that kind of recognition to others. Like a mirror, what we sincerely offer to others tends to come back to us, creating a virtuous cycle of mutual appreciation that gradually dissolves the feeling of invisibility. I've noticed something fascinating about the moments of deep connection that people report. Almost always, these moments involve a sense of altered time, as if the present expands and deepens. We can intentionally cultivate these moments of eternity by practicing what the Japanese call ichigo ichi, treating each encounter as unique and unrepeatable. When we approach an ordinary conversation not as something routine, but as an event that will never be repeated in exactly the same way again, our presence naturally intensifies, opening the door to deeper connections. There is a surprising connection between our relationship with physical space and our ability to form deep relationships. A simple but powerful practice is to create a small corner in your home that is entirely yours, decorated only with things that really resonate with your essence. This space becomes a tangible reminder of who you are when no one is looking, and surprisingly, having this anchoring makes it easier to connect authentically with others, as we know we always have a place to return to ourselves. What few people realize is that loneliness follows cyclical patterns, just like the tides or the seasons. Behind the appearances, there is a subtle mathematics governing the periods of connection and isolation in our lives. When we begin to observe these patterns, we can work with them rather than against them. During the winters of isolation, we can focus on cultivating our inner roots, knowing that the spring of new connections will come naturally when the time is right. This perception of the natural cycles of relational life is one of the most liberating discoveries we can make. Let's start with something you can do today. Create a self-connection ritual that lasts just 5 minutes. It can be as simple as sitting quietly with a cup of tea, watching the steam rise before you start your day, or taking a short walk at dusk without your phone. The important thing is not what you do, but the intention behind it, to be completely present with yourself for those minutes. This daily practice is like depositing small coins in a bank. Individually, they seem insignificant, but over time they create an inner wealth that naturally attracts truer connections. Try what I call the curiosity challenge. Each week, ask a genuinely curious question to someone with whom you normally only have superficial interactions. Not an ordinary question like, "How's your day going?" but something that invites reflection. What has surprised you lately? Or what small thing has brought you joy this week? Often, a single real question can open doors that years of casual conversation have kept closed. And if the person seems confused by your deeper approach, simply smile and say that you're trying to have more meaningful conversations. Creating a date diary can completely transform your perception of connection. Each night, before you go to sleep, write down a moment of connection you experienced during the day, even if it was something small like a smile from a stranger or a kind comment from a colleague. By training your brain to actively look for these moments, you'll begin to notice connections that previously went unnoticed. It's like adjusting the frequency of a radio. Suddenly you start picking up signals that have always been there, but which your previous focus couldn't detect. One practice that has helped many people transform their experience of loneliness is what I call intentional giving back. Choose one day a week to perform 3 small, unsolicited acts of kindness. It could be leaving a thank you note for someone, offering specific help without being asked, or simply giving a sincere compliment. The fascinating thing is that this practice works even when you still feel alone inside. The action comes first, and the feeling of connection often follows, not the other way around. Like planting seeds in seemingly infertile soil, these small acts eventually blossom into something amazing. If you constantly feel like an outsider, consider creating what I call a public personal project. Something you do on a regular basis that other people can observe or participate in. It could be as simple as starting a blog about your nature walks, organizing a small reading group at the local library, or sharing your cooking experiences on social media. When we turn our solitary passions into something visible, we create natural bridges to people with similar interests. People who are often just as quiet as we are and are equally looking for connection. We often forget that connection doesn't always have to involve words. For some people, especially those who are more sensitive or introverted, activities shared side by side can create stronger bonds than hours of conversation. Try finding a group that meets regularly for an activity you enjoy: community gardening, hiking, tai chi in the park, board game nights. The beauty of these gatherings is that the activity itself provides structure and purpose, relieving the pressure of having to sustain constant social interaction, while still allowing genuine connections to develop organically over time. A transformative practice when you feel invisible is to cultivate what I call deliberate attention to your own experience. Start by keeping a small notebook where you regularly jot down observations about things that other people don't seem to notice. The gradual change of colors in the sky at dusk, intriguing patterns in cracked sidewalks, fragmented conversations overheard on the bus. This exercise does 2 powerful things. First, it turns what could be seen as a defect, your hypersensitivity, into a strength. Second, it often reveals that you have a unique perspective which, when finally shared with the right people, will be deeply valued, not rejected. A practical strategy that rarely fails is what I call interest mapping. Take a sheet of paper and write down 5 things that genuinely interest or matter to you, not what you think you should care about, but what really piques your curiosity or passion. Now, for each item, identify a related place, group, or event where you could meet people with similar interests. The key is to be specific and realistic. If you love Russian literature, a general reading group might be too broad. Look for an event dedicated to Tolstoy or Dostoevsky, even if it's online or less frequent. Something that many people find transformative is to adopt what I call a no cancellation policy. When you commit to taking part in something social, you decide in advance that you will attend even if, on the day, you feel that familiar wave of anxiety or desire to cancel. Of course, there are legitimate exceptions such as illness, but committing to go ahead despite the initial discomfort often breaks a cycle that many of us face. The less we interact socially, the more uncomfortable it becomes, creating a vicious circle. And surprisingly, some of the most meaningful connections happen precisely at the events we almost cancel. If you often feel out of place in large groups, try what I call the 2+1 connection. Instead of trying to form individual friendships, which can create excessive pressure, or forcing yourself to integrate into large groups, which can be overwhelming, look for situations where you can interact with 2 people at a time. There's something peculiarly powerful about this dynamic, more fluid than a one-to-one conversation, less complex than a group. It could be lunch with 2 colleagues instead of the whole team, or inviting one friend to bring another friend for coffee. This setup creates a natural balance that often allows more reserved or sensitive people to shine. A powerful tool for transforming your experience of connection is to start practicing what psychologists call graduated self-disclosure. This means intentionally sharing small bits of your true experience, thoughts, or feelings in everyday conversations. Start with low-risk things, perhaps mentioning a book that really touched you and why, or sharing a small personal observation about your day. Gradually, as you feel more comfortable and identify receptive people, you can reveal deeper layers. This practice breaks the paradox that many of us face. We feel disconnected because we don't show who we really are, and we don't show who we are because we feel disconnected. Remember that connection, like any other skill, improves with conscious and specific practice. Just as we wouldn't expect to play the piano perfectly without practicing regularly, neither can we expect deep connections to simply happen without consistent dedication. Start small, perhaps challenging yourself to have one slightly deeper conversation a week, or to share a thought that you would normally keep to yourself. Accept uncomfortable moments and even apparent failures as a natural part of learning. And above all, be kind to yourself throughout the process, recognizing that developing authentic connections in an often superficial world is some of the bravest and most important work we can do. Throughout this journey we've shared, we've explored how the feeling of invisibility can actually be the start of something extraordinary. We talked about how the moments of deepest loneliness often precede the most meaningful connections, just as the darkest night comes before the dawn. We talked about how your sensitivity, which sometimes makes you feel out of place, is actually a rare gift that allows you to see what others don't see. Now, I want you to realize how all these pieces form a coherent mosaic, a larger story about your unique place in the world and in human relationships. There is an ancient pattern in nature that repeats itself in our lives. Expansion and contraction, connection and loneliness, belonging and individuality. Just as a tree cannot grow only upwards, extending its branches towards the sky without also deepening its roots into the dark and lonely earth, we too need these complementary movements. Your periods of isolation are not detours. They are an integral part of the journey, essential moments when you reconnect with yourself so that you can offer something authentic to the world. What makes the human experience so beautiful is precisely this dance between moments of deep connection and periods of reflective solitude. One doesn't exist without the other. In a society that celebrates only constant connection, we forget that many of the most brilliant minds, most compassionate hearts, and most creative souls in human history have deliberately sought out and treasured their times of solitude. Not to escape the world, but to return to it with gifts that could only be cultivated in silence. Trust the natural rhythm of your own heart. Just as we can't force a flower to open its petals ahead of time, we can't force true connections to happen on an artificial timetable. What we can do, and what I hope you will do from now on, is create the conditions for these connections to flourish. By cultivating your authenticity, practicing small acts of courage, remaining open even after disappointments, and above all, treating your sensitivity as the treasure it really is. We often look outside for what can only be found inside. While we desperately search for people who see us completely, we forget to first see ourselves with clarity and compassion. The practices we share are not just pathways to deeper external connections, they are invitations to a transformative relationship with yourself. And it is precisely when we feel at home in our own skin, recognizing our own light, that we naturally attract others who can appreciate that light without trying to diminish or alter it. Always remember that the feeling of not belonging can actually be a call to create something new, a space, a community, a form of connection that doesn't yet exist in the form you need. Many of the most beautiful innovations in art, philosophy, technology, and human relationships were born precisely because someone felt out of place in the world as it was. Instead of seeing your difference as a problem to be solved, consider the possibility that it is a solution not yet manifested for others who, like you, yearn for more authentic forms of connection. Trust the process. Just as a gardener plants seeds without immediately seeing the results, many of the practices we've discussed may not transform your experience overnight. Some days you will still feel invisible, disconnected, out of sync with the people around you. In difficult moments, remember that beneath the surface, important transformations are taking place. Every time you practice full presence, every time you risk being authentic, every time you offer genuine connection even when you are afraid, you are altering deep-rooted patterns and creating new paths. There is an old story about a disciple who asked the master how long it would take to reach enlightenment. The master replied, 10 years. Discouraged, the disciple asked, "What if I practice twice as hard?" The master replied, 20 years. Confused, the disciple asked why, and the master explained, "When one eye is fixed on the destination, there is only one eye left to guide your steps." In the same way, when we are so focused on solving our loneliness or finding perfect connection, we can miss out on the small, genuine connections available in the present, thus lengthening our journey. Sometimes, it is precisely when we stop looking so hard that we find what we were looking for. A truth that few understand is that the ability to be comfortably alone is the foundation of deeper connections with others. When we don't fear loneliness, we don't cling to relationships out of fear, we don't compromise our authenticity to avoid being alone, we don't burden others with unrealistic expectations. Paradoxically, it is precisely when we become complete in our aloneness that we become capable of the freest and most expansive forms of love and connection. Not because we need others to complete us, but because we choose to share our completeness with them. Looking ahead, I want you to keep a simple truth in your heart. You are not alone in your solitude. There is an invisible community of sensitive, deep souls scattered around the world. People who, like you, feel more intensely, observe more carefully, and yearn for more meaningful connections. Some of them will cross your path in the most unexpected places, when you're least looking. Others you may never meet in person, yet there is a silent solidarity between you, a shared understanding of the human experience that transcends words and even direct contact. For a moment, I'd like you to imagine the universe from a broader perspective. See how the stars themselves, which seem isolated in the vast emptiness of space, are actually connected by invisible forces, participating in a cosmic dance of incredible precision and beauty. So it is with human souls too. Even when they seem separate, there is an underlying web of connection that transcends time and space, linking everyone who has ever felt the same joys and sorrows as you do, everyone who has ever looked at the same stars and wondered about their place in the cosmos. Your personal journey through loneliness is, paradoxically, one of the most universally shared experiences of the human condition. As we say goodbye, I want you to take with you one certainty: your sensitivity is needed in this world. Your ability to feel deeply, to question what others accept without thinking, to perceive beauty and pain where others see only the ordinary, these are precious qualities that the world desperately needs. In a time of superficial connections and fragmented attention, your search for something deeper is not a defect to be corrected, but a beacon guiding you towards truer forms of humanity. And so, when you feel invisible again, remember, the stars also seem distant, but their brilliance has the power to guide travelers, inspire dreamers, and remind us all that even in apparent darkness, we are never truly alone. This journey we share is coming to an end, but yours continues. My hope is that these words will stay with you as a silent friend in difficult times, reminding you that your sensitivity is a gift, your solitude has purpose, and your longing for deeper connection is part of a wider calling. In the words of the poet Rumi, the wound is the place where the light enters you. Your experiences of invisibility and disconnection are not just wounds to be healed, but openings through which a truer light can eventually shine, illuminating not only your own path, but also the path of others who, like you, are learning to transform their loneliest moments into sources of wisdom, creativity, and ultimately, authentic connection.